Thank you for joining us to learn about the National Voluntary Farm-Level Crop Biosecurity Standard and Producer Guide for Potato Growers. This video podcast is brought to you by the Canadian Plant Health Council, which plays a vital role in supporting plant health across Canada, working with industry stakeholders and producers, federal, provincial, and territorial governments, and academia. In the following slides, we'll dive into the topic of biosecurity and why it is important. We will then go over the Farm-Level Crop Biosecurity Standard and Producer Guide and how implementing their key target outcomes can support potato producers in managing plant health risks and protecting crops from pests and subsequent crop losses. The standard is voluntary but is a critical component for maintaining crop health and sustainability in agriculture. Farm-level biosecurity is a series of management practices designed to prevent, minimize, and manage the introduction, spread, and release of plant pests. Plant pests can harm crops by causing reduced yields and increasing production costs. A proactive strategy to protecting crops from plant pests enables optimal crop health and productivity and is critical in maintaining the sustainability and profitability of the Canadian agricultural sector. It also ensures continued access to domestic and export markets and assists in opening new markets. Implementing strong biosecurity management practices is the first and often most effective line of defense to reduce risks from plant pests. Why is farm-level biosecurity important? As mentioned, plant pests have a direct impact on the profitability of farming by reducing yields and increasing costs. In addition, the success of Canada's agricultural exports is linked to the excellent phytosanitary status of our crops and crop products. Phytosanitary certification confirms that Canadian plants and plant products are free from pests of concern of the importing countries and are compliant with the relevant international standards and regulations for plant health, ensuring safe trade and preventing the spread of harmful pests across borders. Demonstrating minimal phytosanitary risk is key to maintaining existing export markets, as well as opening and expanding new markets. By adopting biosecurity measures, you help ensure that Canadian products remain competitive on the world stage. Farm-level biosecurity does not have to be complicated. Incorporating simple measures into your everyday farm management practices can go a long way. Small, consistent actions are the most effective way to protect your crops and prevent the costly consequences of pest outbreaks. By making biosecurity part of your daily routine, you safeguard your farm and your future. The primary responsibility for biosecurity falls on farm owners and managers. You are the ones who ensure that crops are protected. Developing a written biosecurity plan is encouraged, and this can be done with the help of crop specialists or consultants. It is also important to get cooperation from visitors and service personnel. Everyone on the farm should follow biosecurity protocols. A biosecurity plan starts with a thorough risk assessment to evaluate potential threats. These would include monitoring everyone entering, working on, and exiting the farm, examining pathways for the introduction, spread, or escape of pests of concerns. This includes pests that are already established in the area or invasive pests, those pests that are not known to occur in a region. And finally, identifying preventative methods to manage or minimize the risk of these pests. The plan should focus on three key components. First, exclusion or preventing pests from entering the farm. Second, management or preventing pests from spreading within the farm. And third, containment or ensuring pests do not escape from the farm and spread to neighboring locations. A farm biosecurity plan will include elements associated with the farm location and layout, operational routines, and crop health management practices. It is important to keep in mind that each farm will have different risks, so your plan should be customized to address your own specific challenges. A national farm-level biosecurity planning guide was put in place to encourage producers to implement the use of sound crop production practices that protect crop health and maximize profits, although they do not guarantee protection from all potential pests. The planning guide identifies the key elements, considerations, and critical points of biosecurity intervention that apply to producers and handlers of agricultural crops. These preventive guidelines are not all-inclusive, but are generally accepted as beneficial management practices for most agricultural crops. One biosecurity plan will not fit the needs of every farm operation, and thus biosecurity plans should be developed to meet the specific needs of each farm. Each operation should incorporate these practices into daily routines that are appropriate for specific high-risk pests. Producers are also encouraged to review their production practices in relation to pest prevention on a frequent basis and ensure their strategies are carried out. An effective biosecurity plan is one that is flexible and open to new knowledge and technology as it becomes available. There are 4 national voluntary farm-level biosecurity standards and guides for crop-based sectors: grains and oilseeds, potato, greenhouse, nursery, and floriculture, and fruit and tree nut. The crop biosecurity standards and producer guides are resources designed to help farmers and producers implement effective biosecurity measures within the farm and are meant to complement existing provincial and trade association guides, manuals, and certification programs. Their purpose is to: first, define biosecurity and highlight its importance in protecting crops. Second, provide a proactive approach to managing biosecurity risks. This includes strategies to minimize the introduction and spread of pests, which ultimately saves time and resources and results in higher quality yields and lower costs. And third, describe potential risks and offer risk mitigation tools to address them effectively. As an example, pests can be introduced into the farm through various inputs like seeds, water, soil, etc. So, some of the mitigation tools for these risk factors would include the purchase of high-quality seeds or seeds that have been tested and found free from pests. Risk mitigation is a process that will identify, assess, and reduce the impact of potential risk, in this case, the introduction of harmful pests to your farm, to minimize loss. The biosecurity standards and producer guides are a practical framework for producers, equipping them with the knowledge and tools to enhance on-farm biosecurity while aligning with other industry and regional efforts. The biosecurity standards and producer guides were collaboratively developed, drawing on a wide range of expertise. Development of a voluntary national farm-level biosecurity standard and producer guidance document for potato growers was facilitated by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, in collaboration with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, the Canadian Potato Council of the Canadian Horticultural Council, the potato industry sector organizations, and provincial departments of agriculture. The development process included a literature review of key topics, a gap analysis of existing farm-level programs, farmer consultation, and ongoing feedback and input from the advisory group, CFIA, and industry experts. The National Farm-Level Biosecurity Standard for potato growers represents a set of measures that focus on excluding, containing, and or managing pests and diseases at the farm level. This approach provides protection from pests and diseases to Canada's potato industry at the farm level, regionally, nationally, and internationally. It is also a guidance document to assist potato growers in developing their biosecurity plan. The standard is accompanied by a producer guide which provides more detailed, commodity-specific best practices and other options to be considered to achieve the risk mitigation goals identified in the standard. It is recognized that Canadian potato growers have a long-standing and successful practice of implementing proactive biosecurity measures on their farms. The objective of the standard is to provide potato producers with a nationally consistent proactive approach to preventing and managing the spread of diseases and pests through good biosecurity practices. The On-Farm Biosecurity Standard is a framework to assist potato producers with developing their farm-specific biosecurity plan for any type of potato production. Developing a farm-specific potato biosecurity plan is guided by the unique circumstances of the farm that includes the various types and combinations of potato production. The biosecurity target outcomes presented in this standard are broad-based and thus should be considered during the development of an on-farm biosecurity plan. A written on-farm plan, although voluntary, is highly recommended. A written plan allows for regular review and updating, and forms a base for training. The standard is based on 3 primary themes: farm property management, farm operational management, and plant health management. At the end of the standard, in an appendix, there is a self-evaluation checklist. The voluntary standard is intended to encourage potato producers to implement the use of best management practices in order to safeguard the long-term health of their potato farm. To prevent the introduction and spread of potato pests and diseases, Each farm should incorporate these practices into appropriate daily routines. The National Farm-Level Biosecurity Standard provides a framework for the development of individual farm biosecurity plans. The Biosecurity Standard is meant to complement existing farm-level programs, such as Canada Gap and environmental farm plans, amongst others. It identifies the key themes, considerations, and critical points of biosecurity intervention, based on pest introduction and transmission pathways. The foundation of this biosecurity standard is guided by scientific information, producer-level consultation, and a detailed analysis of existing farm-level programs. There is a wide range of pathways by which potato pests and diseases can be introduced onto a farm. To build your biosecurity plan, you'll need to know the pests of concern for your farm and identify the pathways by which they are introduced and spread. The common pathways of introduction of pests are as follows. Inputs. This would include planting materials, for example seed potato, seed of rotation crops, transplants, and tubers. Compost, manure, soil amendments, and irrigation water. There is also the operational pathway, and that includes vehicles, equipment, family, staff, and visitors, including on-farm service providers, and waste material disposal, such as plant debris, wastewater, and soil. Finally, there is the natural pathway that includes aerial dispersal by winds and water runoff. Potato producers are encouraged to develop a written on-farm biosecurity plan based on the 3 themes outlined in the standard, for which key biosecurity target outcomes have been identified. Biosecurity is an ongoing cycle, not a one-time effort. It involves assessing risks, planning, implementing measures, and monitoring regularly. It is important that the design, effectiveness, and implementation of the biosecurity plan be assessed not only on a routine basis but also when changes in farm practices or biosecurity issues occur. Producers should review their production practices frequently to ensure that implemented practices are effective in relation to pest and disease prevention and control. We'll now take a closer look at each of the 3 primary themes identified in the biosecurity standard. First is farm property management, which involves the use of detailed maps to identify potential risks for the introduction and spread of pests via the movement of people, inputs, vehicles, equipment, water, and wind. This includes both existing and newly acquired or leased land. The identification of the physical attributes of the farm layout, buildings, roads, and fences assists the producer in visualizing potential pest access points. Implementing biosecurity measures in these critical areas and pathways is important in mitigating the risks associated with the movement of people, inputs, equipment, and vehicles. The designation of specific areas for certain activities provides an opportunity for producers to manage risk in traffic flow. In order to achieve such an outcome, producers need to consider designating receiving areas for inspection of farm inputs and new off-farm acquisitions, designating visitor and farm personnel parking away from production areas and separate from farm equipment and vehicles, designating washing facilities for cleaning and disinfecting equipment, footwear, vehicles, etc., in an area that prevents pest introduction and spread, managing wastewater and disposal. New construction or renovations of existing facilities provide potential opportunities to enhance or facilitate the implementation of effective biosecurity measures and should be another target outcome. Consider how the design can be used to minimize the introduction or spreading of pests by people, products, input vehicles, and/or equipment. Assess the impact of changes to equipment and traffic flow of people and vehicles. And don't forget to mitigate pest introductions through the movement of people, products, or equipment during renovations and new constructions. The next theme is farm operational management, which entails all the day-to-day farm operation activities. It focuses on producer and manager organization, as well as observational skills, sound judgment, and a need for knowledgeable and trained employees who understand why biosecurity guidelines exist and who accept the responsibility for implementation of the management procedures established in the guidelines. A clear knowledge of biosecurity principles, continual commitment to implementation, and frequent assessment of effectiveness of the biosecurity plan will help ensure that it is successful in controlling the introduction, spread, and movement of potato diseases and pests. There are a number of target outcomes that are part of farm operational management. The first is to clearly identify biosecurity zones. Biosecurity zones are areas where biosecurity measures are implemented to control access, exit, and movement of a pest or a disease. A controlled access zone, or CAZ, is a farm area on the farm or field area where access is restricted or otherwise controlled. A restricted access zone, or RAZ, is an area generally located inside the controlled access zone, where access by people or equipment is further restricted. To be effective, these zones must be visible and controlled, and their importance understood. This is done by posting clear signage identifying these zones, as well as signage for controlled movement between zones. Newly acquired or leased land should be assessed prior to incorporating them into biosecurity zones. Make sure to evaluate their history and previous use. People moving between different farms or between different biosecurity zones within a farm can spread pests on footwear and plant debris. Thus, the second target outcome in the farm operational management theme is ensuring that farm personnel and visitors, including service providers, are trained and are informed of and comply with the farm biosecurity protocols. This is done by briefing visitors prior to entering production areas, maintaining visitor and service logs, providing clean and disinfected footwear or footwear covers prior to entering the farm, providing dedicated clothing especially within restricted zones, and establishing clear traffic patterns and documenting movement of people in and out of the farm. The third target outcome under farm operational management seeks to mitigate the risk of pest introduction through the movement of vehicles or equipment. All vehicles and equipment entering and moving within your farm pose a serious biosecurity threat. They can carry soil and plant debris, including plant diseases and pests. The risk is increased with shared, contracted, and second-hand vehicles and equipment due to their use on other farms with unknown plant health status and biosecurity practices. Care must be taken with non-agricultural vehicles and equipment that travel within your farm, for example, earth-moving equipment, gas exploration equipment, and utility service vehicles. A good biosecurity plan considers incorporating protocols and controls to mitigate the risk associated with moving soil and plant debris. This can be achieved by establishing designated parking areas for visitors and farm staff and providing transportation for on-farm movement, ensuring that the vehicles of service providers and other off-farm vehicles and equipment are cleaned and disinfected upon entering and exiting the farm, ensuring that farm staff follow all biosecurity procedures pertaining to the movement of vehicles, especially when moving from zone to zone, assessing the biosecurity risks associated with the movement of equipment and vehicles transitioning between various biosecurity zones. Based on this risk assessment, soil and crop debris may need to be removed and equipment and vehicles disinfected, maintaining cleaning and disinfection records, and minimizing the movement of equipment over wet soil to avoid excessive movement of soil. The last target outcome to achieve under the farm operational management is managing farm waste. Potato culls, waste material, rogue plants, soil, and water used for the washing of potatoes pose biosecurity risk pathways that must be addressed. The pests and pathogens that these materials may contain can easily spread to growing potato crops on your farm and to other farms in your area. Proper disposal is a critical component to mitigate risks associated with waste material and packing material. Disposal of all forms of waste should be done in accordance with existing federal, provincial, and municipal legislation. It is therefore important to ensure culled potatoes are discarded, appropriately buried, or disposed of. Control on-farm and off-farm movement of potato tubers designated for use as animal feed. Remove rogue material from the field and dispose of the rogue plants that contain any disease or pest. Carry out safe handling, storage, and disposal of used packaging material. Keep areas around water sources free of potato crop waste and other potential sources of infestation. Ensure cleaning and disinfection wastewater is contained and disposed of appropriately. And avoid using or returning to fields, wastewater, and sediment resulting from washing, unless treated. The third and last theme of the standard is establishing and implementing a plant health management plan. Plant health management decision-making directly pertains to potato production and cultivation practices, as well as to the biology of potato diseases and pests that pose biosecurity threats. Plant health management forms one of the pillars of a sound biosecurity plan. The first target outcome of the plant health management theme is to ensure there are preventative management practices in place for seed potatoes and other crop inputs such as fertilizer and manure. These should be sourced and managed to minimize the introduction and spread of pests and diseases. This starts with sourcing certified or high-class seed potatoes and planting pest and disease-resistant varieties where possible. Planting cover crops to control weeds and using crop rotation are additional preventative management measures that should be considered. Keeping accurate records for all source crop inputs, as well as maintaining detailed production and storage records, are key to the production and maintenance of healthy potato crops. To minimize the impact and to successfully contain and/or eradicate pests and diseases, it is important that a good surveillance program is developed and implemented for early pest detections. Potato growers should consider training farm staff to recognize potato diseases and pests and teach them crop production practices. Farm staff should also be informed of emerging pest and disease alerts. Accurate and routine scouting reports should be maintained, noting the presence or absence of weeds, pests, and diseases, or other crop health issues. When a suspected problem is observed, take the time to investigate to identify pests and implement appropriate management practices. Consulting professional agrologists or other professionals for assistance as required. Finally, report any unusual finding to the appropriate authorities. A good plant health management program also includes a pest response plan that is developed and implemented effectively to contain and control disease or pest outbreaks. The ability to react quickly and effectively to a pest outbreak is vital in minimizing impacts on an operation and preventing further pest spread. Ensuring that the producer's biosecurity plan anticipates new biosecurity threats and has procedures in place to trigger the steps required to contain any outbreak is critical. This approach ensures that the situation is quickly brought under control and managed. This is done by, as already mentioned, investigating immediately any suspected pests and implementing appropriate management practices to identify, control, contain, and/or resolve the potential outbreak. Developing a procedure for reporting pests and other biosecurity risks to the appropriate plant health authority and specialists, including maintaining emergency contact information, and developing and being prepared to implement an effective disposal system for weeds and potentially infested plant material. At the end of the standard is a self-audit checklist that goes over all the components to consider in developing your farm-specific biosecurity plan. The audit checklist is broken into the three main themes of property management, farm operational management, and plant health management, and their various subsections. Use the checklist to conduct a self-assessment of the biosecurity measures currently implemented on your farm. Completing the checklist will help identify areas where biosecurity measures may be required and will help provide a framework for the development of a biosecurity plan. The producer guide provides information on biosecurity practices that can be implemented at the farm level to achieve the target outcomes of the National Farm-Level Biosecurity Standard for potato growers. The producer guide, together with the planning tool, can assist in developing a written biosecurity plan. The producer guide follows the same three primary themes as the standard: farm property management, farm operational management, and plant health management. There are 4 steps in developing the biosecurity plan. First, complete the planning tool to determine your current level of biosecurity. Next, consult the producer guide and the National Farm-Level Biosecurity Standard for potato growers on each of the points included in the planning tool. Then, develop and document your plan. And finally, review the plan on a regular basis to reflect the current situation on your farm. We would like to thank those that contributed to the development of the Biosecurity Standard and Producer Guide for potato growers. This includes the Canadian Potato Council of the Canadian Horticultural Council, the potato industry sector organizations, and provincial departments of agriculture, as well as the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. We also want to thank the Canadian Plant Health Council and the Biosecurity Working Group for their expertise, guidance, and contributions to these video podcast series. Finally, we thank all potato producers for your efforts every day to protect your farms from pests through implementation of biosecurity measures.